After revolutionizing the beat-em-up genre with Renegade and then creating the massively popular Double Dragon franchise, all eyes were on Technos to see what they would come up with next. Unfortunately, their follow-up was a barely remembered brawler named the Combatribes, which was nowhere near as influential as their previous stabs at the genre. But while it pales in comparison to what other companies were doing at the time, I would argue that this one-and-done beat-em-up has a lot going for it. From the heavily censored Super NES port to the controversial gangs to a twist ending that you definitely won't see coming, we have a shocking amount of ground to cover in this episode. So, turn back now if you don't want to know what happens next, because today we're going to spoil the stories and endings for both the arcade and Super NES versions of the Combatribes. This is Game Over, the early years. The first thing you need to know about the Combatribes is that it's a 3-player arcade brawler released in 1990. It has one of those classic beat-em-up stories where Berserker, Belova, and Blitz decide to use their martial arts know-how to defeat some of New York City's nastiest gangs. This led to a slightly different Super Nintendo port that came out 2 years later. This version largely kept the same levels and enemies, but also added some much-needed depth to the story and completely changed the ending. Because the structure and the level designs are so similar, I'm just going to talk about both of the stories at the same time and compare the differences as we go along. Alright, like I said, the arcade game basically throws you into New York City with a mission to fight a bunch of gangs. You'll see that it's a little bit more complicated than that, but at the start, there's really nothing more than just punching and kicking gang members until the streets are safe. The Super NES version, on the other hand, well, it offers a more elaborate story that fills in some of the gaps. There's just one problem. Nothing about this setup has aged well. Oh man, I hope you're sitting down for this. We're told in the opening cinema, with the World Trade Center positioned right in the middle of the frame, that the Combatribes have come to New York City, the center of all evil in the United States. Why? Well, it's because they heard a rumor about a mysterious organization controlling America's street gangs. And that evil organization's name is... yeah, it's Ground Zero. Look, I told you, none of this has aged well. The point is that both games give our trio of heroes a reason to go to New York City and kick some ass, starting with a motorcycle gang called the Nuclear Warheads in Times Square. For the most part, these stages are the same, though the console versions offer a short cinema that sets up the next location. In this instance, Fats, the boss of the Nuclear Warheads gang, argues that he's just a slave and that the demon clowns over at Coney Island, well, they'll have more information. They don't, but you have to admit that they do have a fun gimmick. The demon clowns really live up to their name and even have a cool Karnov-style boss that blows fire and hints that the person in charge might be a woman. Intriguing. The next stop is a local nightclub where our heroes go up against their most annoying foe yet, the Slash Skate Screamers. They're led by Trash, a purple-haired punk rocker who is pretty much the only person there not wearing roller skates. Much like the rest of the bosses, he doesn't have much to say and instead points the finger at the barbarians in Harlem, which is probably not the gang name I would have gone with if I were localizing this game back in 1992. I also would have thought twice about using this boss, Windwalker, a Native American who looks like he walked straight out of the most racist Western on John Wayne's resume. Yeah, this has not aged well. The good news is that the mostly naked stereotype actually does have some useful information, but we're going to get to that in a few minutes. First, what we need to do is we need to go back to the arcade game where the trio is getting ready to battle the city's most influential gang. That's right, the Slaughter Troops. These guys control a high-rise tower and they've come prepared, making this the longest and most challenging stage yet. After punching literally everybody in the building, We take the helicopter to the pier and trap the Kingpin and make him pay for his crimes. But hang on, what's this? The Kingpin is immediately killed by a super powerful woman in a bright pink dress. This must be the woman Karnov was talking about all the way back on Coney Island. But hang on, what's her deal? Why is she able to harness the power of electricity? What's going on here? Alright, let's go ahead and watch the ending and see how the story wrapped up in the original arcade game. Okay, I can tell that you still have a few questions. Don't worry, because Windwalker's ready to reveal all. Apparently, the woman in the pink dress is named Martha Splatterhead, and she controls all the gangs in New York City. Her headquarters is a high-rise tower located at 1991 GZ Avenue, which should look familiar. But where this game differs from the arcade version is what you end up finding at the top of the tower. Instead of fighting over a helicopter, there's a different boss battle that gives us the final piece of the Combatribes puzzle. After we defeat Master Blaster, it's revealed that both he and Martha are cyborgs created by the Army's biotech lab. This sets up the final fight on the roof, where Martha uses her super strength and electrical attacks to defeat our heroes. But don't worry, because it doesn't work, and after a few well-placed kicks, this is what happens next. I would say that both of these games have pretty good third act twists, and I like how they handle it in different ways. I especially like how the arcade version subverts our expectations by killing off the typical Kingpin character in order to make us fight an 80s Valley Girl. And then on the Super Nintendo version, they fill out the story by revealing that Ground Zero is being controlled by a couple of rogue cyborgs created by the government. That's a great twist that definitely would have shocked me back in the day. Unfortunately, that important plot twist is revealed in the game's print ads. So, everybody with a GamePro subscription saw that ending coming a mile away. Well, there's a lot about this game that hasn't aged especially well. I will confess that I much prefer the Combatribes over a lot of the Double Dragon sequels. It's nowhere near as good as Final Fight or Streets of Rage. But I dig the way that Technos tried to evolve the beat-em-up gameplay as well as the storytelling. And best of all, the ending was honest. It says after Martha was defeated, the Combatribes left and were never seen again. Ain't that the truth? Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Game Over, the early years. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new episodes almost every week. There are more than 150 of these episodes on the playlist. You should check them out. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is a classic game or franchise that just doesn't get enough attention? Like I said in the video, I would definitely take this over, say, Double Dragon 3 or 4 or especially 5. Oh, that one's terrible. And yet, nobody seems to be talking about this game. Are there any other games or franchises that people need to be talking about? Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we have a packed week in store for you, especially when it comes to reviews. I have so much to go over and not much time. You'll see. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button, and hey, do me a favor and support what we're doing here. Until then,